What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah, and today I invite you to grab a seat, a snack, and a beverage. Let me talk at you for a minute. Today I'd like to talk at you about a game that has been highly anticipated on my end and is just for reasons, some within and some beyond my control. It's taken me a long time to get it to this point. And that is Hametsu from Blacksite Studios. And as with all of the Blacksite Studio rulebooks that I've gotten within the past year or two, it is gorgeous. The binding, the art, the paper quality, the layout, it's another 10 out of 10 as far as rulebooks go. My only real complaint about the book itself is that they use a fairly glossy paper, which isn't bad for anybody except me who wants to highlight in their book. And what you need to play the game. Let's do a quick overview of the world in which this game happens. So imagine 16th century Japan. You're just going about your life doing whatever it is that you do. And all of a sudden the entire island world is rocked by a cataclysm. We're talking absolute destruction. From that cataclysm and from this disaster emerge demons and monsters of folklore. Oni and Tengu and spider women and all kinds of crazy stuff. And from those pockets of survivors and those pockets of humanity come hunters. People who have dedicated themselves to, for whatever reason, to hunting down these monsters and trying to create a once again safe and livable world for the people of Japan. That is the world of Hametsu. This game had me at feudal Japan and all that stuff because I personally love that time period. Plus, I'm a sucker for a weird history game. You know, you throw in a little bit of things from the real world with some other crazy stuff going on, and I'm probably going to be interested. Now, it seems that last year I came across a lot of games that felt or were this kind of theme where it's your team of guys against like one or two, a couple big baddies. This one, reading into it deeper as I have, there's a few more extra mobs and stuff than I originally thought there were. But I just feel like I've seen a few games recently along on Majestic 13 last year. I just came across Doomed. Or is it The Doomed? I think it's just Doomed. And then this, and I'm sure others, where it's your team fighting against one large opponent. Anyhow, let's get into what you need to play the game. Obviously, you need the book. You need dice, which in this are D6. I like that. The D6 is a standard dice. Everybody has it. No need to go buy a bag of 25 D12s or a million, 30 D4s or whatever. Basic dice, I'm okay with that. No complaints there. The Hunter Sheet, which is very, very easy to get from Blacksite. It's easy to download as a PDF and print out. Love that. Ease of access. Miniatures they make. Blacksite makes a beautiful range of models for this game, but you could use pretty much whatever you want. One of my patrons, Kurt, has actually been playing the game reskinned with his Infinity model so that it has kind of a sci-fi cyberpunk theme, and he seems to be having good fun with it. So always remember, you're not limited by your collection. You can do what you want, but now again, I want that flavor, so I've been amassing terrain and getting models painted and trying to get myself ready to present the world of the game, which is part of the reason it's taken me so long to get there. But I'm getting real close. You'll also need, in addition to your hunters, wherever you get them from, you will also need enemies. Now, you have 4 or 5 different classes of lesser enemies, and then you have your big boss. So you need at least one model to represent your big boss, and then some other models to represent the cronies or the Oni, which they're technically going to be Oni if you're going by the book, but that's what the stat block says. But whatever models you're using, you need 10 to 20 of them depending on the mission. There are also several tokens that you will need, but it gives you the measurements for them if you would like to make them yourself, or Blacksite does, I think, sell a token set, but I think they also have a printable set that you can get in that resource section. But don't quote me on that. Everything's done in inches. 3x3 is the play size, and then of course you need terrain. You need to be able to break line of sight and create your order, whether that be with books and soda cans and Pringle cans and boxes of macaroni and cheese, or a fully fleshed out feudal Japanese table, or if you're reskinning to a different era or whatever. You need some terrain or something to represent the terrain, however you choose to do that. But it's important to the game that you don't just have a big open square. So, broad strokes overview of the game. You have 3 phases, and the game progresses from one into the other. You begin in the stealth phase, where everybody's sneaking around, nobody knows you're there yet. Eventually, though, you will do something, or something will happen, and an alarm will be raised, and when that happens, you move to the clash phase, which is where the enemies will be actively pursuing you and trying to fight you and interact with you and all that good stuff. And then at the end, when the clash phase ends, once the boss has been summoned or discovered or found, and then you move into the boss phase. And once you're into the boss phase, all of the lesser minions will flee the board as quickly as possible. Again, that's the big picture flow of the game. Let's go a little bit deeper into the order of play as far as the player turn and the enemy turn. Well, now, I say turns, and it is a turn, but there's no turn limit to the game. It just keeps going back and forth between player and enemy. So when it's the player's turn, or player's activations, you pick your hunter. That hunter gets 2 actions. You can repeat the same action twice, which I love. I like it when you can do that. And you go through all your hunters, and then when you're done with that, you check for stealth. And then you go to the enemy turn. If you stayed stealthy and they don't spot you and raise the alarm, then they'll behave one way. If you do, then they'll behave a different way. So in the enemy turn, aware enemies, the enemies who have been made aware of the presence of the hunters, will always activate first, and their first action will pretty much always be to raise the alarm. When you activate aware enemies first, and you activate closest to the hunters, and then you activate moving further away. So the models and enemies that are the farthest away from your hunters are going to be the last ones to activate. Once they activate, they'll perform their actions as they do. Once the enemies have all completed their actions, it will check for stealth again, and then continue on to the player turn. It just keeps going back and forth, going through those things. Now, that's, again, still a pretty broad stroke, so let's go a little bit deeper into a couple of the concepts that we talked about there. So, especially the checking for stealth part, because that's pretty important for knowing which phase of the game you're in. Chill. So, to check for stealth, you have to do 3 things. The first thing you have to do is check to see if an enemy is within 12 of a hunter and has line of sight to them. If they do, they get an aware token. If an enemy is within 12 inches of a dead body and has a line of sight to it, they get an awareness token. And if an enemy was targeted with an attack but not killed, they get an aware token. Once they're aware, it will always use its first action to raise the alarm. And once that is performed, you remove all aware tokens from all enemies, and the game shifts into the clash phase. If there are ever 2 things that should happen at the same time and you're not clear on which to resolve first, you may decide the order in which to resolve them. So throughout the book, you'll hear scatter, randomly. There is no set method to do it. Do it however you like, as long as it generates a random result. So if it was a scatter, something like that, could be a D10 in the direction of the point, or flip a scatter puck if you have one of those laying around there from other games. Just whatever system you're comfortable with, whatever method you're comfortable with for creating random results, go with it. As you progress through these phases and combat these enemies, you will be asked to attempt tests. combat tests, skill tests, whatever kind of tests. When you see that, you'll see stat and then a number. The stat tells you which dice pool to roll from, and the number tells you how many successes you need. Anything that is a 4, 5, or 6 is a success. So, for example, if your strength was 4 and you need 2 successes, and you roll 4d6, and you get a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 5, you only got 1 success there, so that would be a failed roll. It's a very simple and elegant system. It reminds me of the old White Wolf system that I played when I was a kid. Anytime I see, like, roll this many dice, look for this many successes, it always makes me think of White Wolf. Just because that was the game that I was exposed to early. So that's how we take tests. That's our order of operations. That's the bare bones kind of stuff we need. True line of sight in the game. I did forget to mention that. So get down if you can see it, or if your laser pointer gets it. If it crosses cover, give them cover. If it doesn't, then you get your clear shot. But true line of sight in this game. We then get into hunter actions. And off gate, I want to make sure I talk about move here, because he's done something different with move that a lot of games expressly tell you you cannot do, which is to break your movement up. So if you got 6 inches of movement, you could move an inch, perform an attack, and then keep moving the rest of your movement. I think that's going to lead to some very fun and interesting and cinematic kinds of moments on the tabletop. A disengage action is just a simple move 1 inch away. I like that there's no test or roll, or I don't necessarily mind those things in other games, but it's nice to see a game where I don't have to worry about that. I can just step away. A few less dice that I have to roll for things like that, or less things that I can forget or mess up. And so I like that. To use an equipment is 1 action, and you can use it, or you can hand it to another hunter who is within 3 inches of you. So it's something that would be on their sheet, smoke grenade or whatever kind of thing. Not necessarily their weapons, but an item of some sort. When you jump, you can just jump up to your movement in inches. However, there is a bit of a caveat to that. And that is that if you end up falling down further than what your movement would carry you, you take 2 successes at damage 2 for each inch that is beyond your movement. So like if you were trying to get down from the top of a building and it was 9 inches to the ground and you have 6 inches of movement, that extra 3 inches would result in 6 successes at damage 2 that you then get to save against. You do get a chance to save against them, but off gate right there you have a potential for 6 damage coming at for 12 damage coming at your face right there. Next we have the hide mechanic, which I really, really like the way this was created. A lot of games have a hide mechanic, but it usually just means, they can't draw line of sight to them for however long they're hidden. I like this because this tells you to actually remove the model from the table. Now you do have to pass a mind 2 test. So again, with our what we know from earlier, that means we're going to roll our mind dice and we need at least 2 successes to hide. We remove that model from the table and we return them to the table at the end of the next enemy turn within 1 inch of any hiding spot that is on the table. Not necessarily the one they hit at. They could slink around to the other side of the board potentially. So that seems like a lot of fun. 1 action to interact. Some things will require you to do a test when you interact with them. If that's the case, it'll tell you that in the section or page or excerpt or mission or whatever it is that you're interacting with will tell you what that test will be. You can loot a dead body if you're in base contact with it. You roll a d3 on the lootables table and add the corresponding item or items to your inventory. And once it's been looted, you remove it from play. So when you kill something, either just lay it down on its side or put a token there to remind you. because there is potential loot that you could be leaving on the board. Investigating clues is the next action. It costs 1 action, and this is the one that helps you find the boss. So there's a table on page 104. You're rolling a d6, and you get +1 for each clue that you've already investigated. And you're looking, as soon as you get a 9 or more, you have found the boss. So you got to investigate at least 3 tokens, 3 clues, before you can even find the boss. So you're guaranteed to have a fair bit of that maneuvering around and dealing with the little guys before you get to the boss, which is cool. I like it. It fits. You can also choose to have a hunter pull back, which is not the entire team pulls back, but an individual model pulls back. And it doesn't have to be from like a table edge or anything. You can just have them dip out from whatever point. Any gold or loot that they've picked up, they get to keep, but any quest items that they have will drop at their feet, the feet or the point of their final location. They will not level up, and they would still have to roll for injuries as normal. Then we come to enemy actions, and look at this really cool picture right here of the Oni. So enemies will behave according to the phase. In the stealth phase, they will go by the starting orders that are given by the scenario. There are 4 different things that they can be tasked with in the beginning: to stand guard, to wander, to patrol, or to perform a task. Those are all pretty self-explanatory, but a couple of things of note. Stand guard, they'll turn to face a random direction, but never in the same direction, and never to face something that's within 3 inches of their line of sight. When they wander, it's in a random direction. They will try to go around terrain. Patrol is defined by the scenario, so the scenario will tell you what to do. A task will be anything. It could be building, burning, clearing, whatever. And then raise the alarm is the kind of special one that's triggered by the checks during the stealth phase, and it will remove all aware tokens and immediately move to the clash phase, where they will now act according to the instincts listed on their profile. So at this point, they go by whatever their stat card says they are. We then come into a more in-depth discussion of combat. Still pretty straightforward. So it is opposed roll. So I attack my target. I roll my I roll my melee or range stat, whichever is applicable. They roll their resilience stat. We're both looking for 4-ups. Their successes cancel out my successes. And if I have any successes left over, my weapon will deal damage for each of those successes. Pretty straightforward. Give it a second. Your effective range for combat is defined by your weapon. So it could be 1 inch for a katana, or however far for shuriken or a crossbow, or whatever you happen to have. Spell, whatever. You are engaged with another model when you are within that model's effective melee range. Once you are engaged, you can no longer perform move actions unless it is a disengaged move an inch away. Enemies, if they for some reason want to disengage, do not have to perform an action. They can just move away from you. Here's something I do like. You can target a model with ranged, target a model who is engaged with ranged at no penalty at all. Before I can explain critical attacks, I want to discuss something else. I'm going to skip over it and come back. The game uses facing. So your models have a 180-degree arc in front of them that they can see, which then brings us to critical attacks. Critical attacks are when you attack from outside of their arc of vision. So when you're outside of that front 180, all of your weapons get +1 damage. So throwing a dart in the back of a little lesser Oni skull is a potentially good finisher. Every hunter in Hametsu is blessed with some amount of divine favor. It comes in the form of divine favor points. those can be used for rerolls. You can use it to reroll your dice during an attack or resilience roll, and it can be used to force an enemy to reroll a test, attack, or resilience roll. You can only use a point once. You can only use points for yourself. So if you're playing with a friend, you can't spend your points to help them reroll dice. They renew in between games unless you spent a divine favor point during the hunter creation to get an extra stat. That one is burned and gone forever. Some characters are able to use traps. Not all, but some. And there are different kinds of traps, but they all work pretty much the same. It's a marker that you place on the table, and it will go off when one of a few criteria are met. Either when the max number of them that can be there is exceeded, when it's triggered by an enemy, or when some other specific condition, maybe described by the scenario or the hunter, is met. It's set off by an enemy if any part of their base crosses any part of the outer edge of the trap. And then once it goes off, it's removed and it is no longer active. As far as being killed and removed from play, we already kind of discussed some of the stuff with monster bodies. Make sure you leave them now because you can be looted. One thing to note is that at the beginning of the boss phase, you remove all bodies. So if you don't get it looted before the boss phase, you don't get to loot it. When a hunter goes to 0, you immediately remove them, and then when you're doing your post game and you have your roll for injuries, you'll add +2 to the roll for that model. Next, we come into the section for building your hunters, which, as always, we'll take a look at separately from this video. But I'll say here that it is a pretty straightforward process, but we'll take a deeper look later. What I do want to touch on are the kind of groupings. So the core game originally came with 3 different schools. You have the School of Magic, the School of Stealth, the School of Strength. Now, because of how well it did in the Backroom event, the School of Corruption was released as well in the main book. I think it probably would have been released eventually anyways, but it probably would have been maybe as a separate supplement or something. I don't know. I'm not in this. But anyways, in each of the schools, you have 3 different classes. So your School of Magic has the Onmyoji, and then it'll have some abilities for that model, and then the Bunraku, which I'm saying these words wrong. I know, the Monk, and then you go into the School of Stealth, which is going to be like your Shinobi, your Geisha, and then one more. Who's the other one that goes in here? The Matagi, which is an archer. And then School of Strength, you got a Sumo, a Gaijin, and a Ronin. So that's your kind of your physical, your sneaky, and then your others. I haven't looked too deeply into the School of Corruption because I don't have the models for that. Once you've got all your hunters assembled, you're ready to start playing the game. So you need to generate a scenario, and it uses a random generation system, kind of rogue light. So I like that because you're going to get a lot more playability out of it as opposed to having just like 5 or 6. These are your scenarios. So I like seeing that in a game. When you're getting ready to do your scenario, your setting will determine your location, so what your board kind of theme is going to be. Your situation is why you are there to investigate. Scaling determines the difficulty. Enemies are the type of regular people, and then your boss is, of course, the big bad that you're going to hopefully discover. Scaling works like so. So when you look at the models, the enemies, they will have, for example, 2, 3, 4 damage. That 2 is the lowest scale, 3 is the mid scale, 4 is the high scale. And they'll say on the enemies, it'll be like level 1 to 4 is scale, and then 5 to 8, and then 8 to 12, or however it is. But it tells you which difficulty to set the monsters to based on your hunter's levels. Now, and then you've got charts. You've got a chart, a D6 chart for setting, D6 chart for situation, D6 chart for enemies, and then a D6 chart for the boss, and as well as when the boss comes in, a D6 chart for how they enter. So ambush or scent of blood, or it's watching us, or death from above, or it can dig, or it just appeared. Here it is now. Let's deal with it. For me, starting off on the table playing this, I am going to be playing through the Wolf and the Devil campaign because it's specifically designed for level 1, for starting level 1 characters. And I want to play through it at level. So I'm going to do that first, and then I will be coming back to these charts for later games after I finish that and get more of the bosses and everything painted up. Right now I'm getting the stuff together and painted that I need specifically for like one mission at a time of the Wolf and the Devil, because I'm now close enough. I've got the terrain. I'm ready to get this game out and get it playing. I'm very excited. Now, all of that being said, it does provide you with 7 pre-made scenarios. If you want to just quick grab go, or you're trying to show a friend or something, it gives you one, I think, for maybe each of the main bosses. Nope, boss random. So one for 6 different bosses, and then one that has a random boss and no enemies. It's just a boss fight. That's the one. A game of Hametsu ends when one of 3 criteria have been met. Either when all of the clue tokens have been interacted with and the boss has not been found, or the hunters have defeated the boss, or the hunters are all removed from play, either from pulling back or from having their health or body points reduced to 0. Next, we come to leveling up and resolving injuries. So whenever a hunter is on the table after a boss has been defeated, they will get to level up. To do that, you roll their body dice, which are determined by their class. Add whatever that number is to their body total points. You can add an entry from their Path of Legend, which is the progression system that it has. So at each level, you get a couple of different options. When you're choosing, you can choose one from your current level or one from any previous level. And then you gain 25 gold for each level your hunter currently has. So that you will gain more gold as you level more. And it's kind of a milestone. It's not XP based. It's just you defeat a boss, here's a level. Then we come to injuries. If you end the game with less than half of your starting body, you have to roll a d6 on the injury table. Some things can be permanent. Some may heal, some may just take time. You never know. If you were removed from the table, however, you add +2 on that roll. This is kind of new. I don't know that I've ever seen an injury system where you would have to roll on the chart even though you didn't die. That's pretty hardcore. I like it. 8 is the bad one. Fatal damage, the hunter is killed. That's the worst. So a 6 when you've been removed from the table due to body points is bye-bye birdie. In between games, your hunters can spend gold and trade things. Your divine favor will also refill at that time. You can also do weapon modifications, which is pretty neat. So as you progress, you get this option. You cannot do it as a level 1. When you're ready to do it, you have to pay the original cost of the weapon multiplied by the upgrade level. So if it's your first time doing it, they start at level 0, so you're going to level 1. So if it was 25 gold to buy it, it would be 25 gold to take it to level 1, and then 50, and then etc., etc., etc. So it can get pretty expensive. So maybe at higher levels, you're pulling in larger amounts of gold. When you do it, the upgrades must be bought in order, and they can't be skipped for a higher tier. For each upgrade level, it gains +1 damage, and no upgrades again are level 0. So that's pretty cool. You can make your weapons better as you go. That's pretty gnarly. But you can't jump from like a level 1 to a level 3. You have to buy 1, then 2, then 3, etc., etc., etc. Now, as with any good RPG, there are those of us, myself included, who don't really read through the skill trees and the progression trees as thoroughly as we probably should. And then we end up getting leveled up and getting some time sank into the toon to realize that we have a trashy build. Well, luckily there's a way to fix that. But you're limited to doing it one time per character, and it does cost 100 gold. Wait. An amount of gold equal to their level multiplied by 100. So if you got all the way to level 8 and you wanted to respec, it would be 800 gold. But it will allow you to completely rebuild your skill trees as if you were starting from level 1. So I would suggest maybe just spend a little bit of time looking at those trees and maybe doing some theory crafting about how to build out the toons. And of course, step 1 is to figure out who you're playing, which I still haven't figured out which hunters I'm going to start with. I have no idea. I know that I'm going to use the sumo. The other 3, I have no idea. After that, we come to some tables for general goods, melee weapons, ranged weapons, armor, then our loot tables, our relic tables, and then into the clue table for the enemies. And then we've got all of our enemy profiles, the Onis, all the boss profiles. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of Oni. Lesser, regular, marksman, lookout, captain, and shaman. The lesser Oni are the one that you need the most of. You need at most 10 of those. I think the Oni and the marksman and the lookouts probably like 3 to 6 of each. The captain and shaman, I think just 1 of each, maybe 2, but definitely fewer of the more powerful ones. And then we have our bosses. We have the Enenra, the Daitengu, the Shikigami, the Nogitsune, Komainu, Ogumo, all the different things. Now, these are all the monsters that came with the original release. And as of right now, they're about to release a raid boss monster. It's like a big old honking thing for this game for the raid content. The models for these bosses are they're really, 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 really nice. They're really. I think they don't have stats or anything, so they don't have bodies. They're just kind of a walking buff that hangs out with you, and they're fairly cheap. They range from 125 up to 250, which you can get them at level 3. So that's seems about right. Level 5, you would be getting, I think, 500 gold, so you could just buy your mount outright, maybe if you want one of the cheap ones. But yeah, interesting. So now you gotta find I guess I don't have to find models for these, do I? Yeah, they're an additional model, but they do not take actions. They just always stay in base contact with their hunter. And again, when you roll on your injuries, a 7 or 8, your companion dies, unfortunately. We got some environment and weather tables for heavy rain, blistering heat, freezing cold, blustering winds, settled fog, and lightning storms. And then we have the events. So now events are optional. And so if you choose to use them, at the beginning of the player turn, you roll a d6 to see if anything unusual happens. On a 5 up, an event has occurred. So then you would roll d66 on this table. And there's strong winds, fallen Ronins, hidden marksmen, shamanic rituals, all kinds of things that can happen. I'm not reading through these. I have not read through all of these because when I use them, I want to be surprised. I don't want to know what all the options are. I want to be surprised by that. So then we come to the raid rules, and this may be some of the most video game feeling stuff that I've ever seen, like on paper. It reads and it feels very much like video game type thing. So first off, the first thing to know about raids is that they're not always going to be on a 3x3, and sometimes they will call for specific pieces of terrain. So there's something that you may have to do a little bit of extra prep work for. Also, deployment of the raid boss and the hunters will be specified by the scenario, and it's important to establish cardinal directions on the map. I normally just go above me is north and then around the compass from there, but you'll need to know those things for certain placement and stuff that will happen throughout the raid. And in a raid scenario, there are no phase changes. You just start with the boss fight. Event table is not used during raids. Some boss abilities will have cooldowns. If they do, put a dice or some kind of marker. I'm probably going to end up using my bolt action pin markers because I can't knock those over and lose the number. And then whenever at the beginning of each enemy turn, it lowers by 1. When it gets from 1 to 0, they can use that ability again. Each raid boss will have specific nerfs that it will apply to the hunters to increase the difficulty of the scenario. When your hunters beat a raid boss, and this is the part to me that really feels like a video game, you don't level up like normal. Instead, you get a roll on that boss's raid loot table. When you get a piece of raid gear, you have 3 options. You can keep it and add it to your sheet. You can trade it to someone else, or you can discard it for a raid token. Now, if you are going to give it to someone else, you have to do that before it is used. Once it is used, it is soul-bound to the model that used it. So you can't use it and then pass it around. You got to make that decision right then. Now, a raid token can be collected and then traded in for specific pieces of gear that you want for that hunter. So you could just forego some of the step of passing it around and just go straight to getting the one that you want. And then we come into, I think there's one currently. Yes, we have the Omokad or Omokade, which is this big millipede looking monster. It's terrifying. First one of those scenarios. We then come to the Wolf and the Devil, which is the pre-made narrative campaign that I'm going to be starting off with. This is where I'm going to be starting my on-the-table experience with Hametsu. And it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 missions. And I'm not reading ahead. I'm making sure that I don't read ahead on, because I don't want to know what's happening again. I want to experience it. Nope. 7 missions in that campaign. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That's a lot more than I thought it was. I thought it was 3 or 4. I did not realize it was 7 whole missions. That's freaking awesome. Then we come to the Ritual of Corruption. So the School of Corruption has somewhat dwindling numbers, and they need more people. So any non-School of Corruption class can be corrupted once they reach level 7, but it does not come for free. There is a cost. There is the sacrifice of the soul, where you lose a divine favor; of the body, a third of your health, your max body points; of the mind, a third of your mind, etc., for all of your stats. There are also some side effects. You can get soft skin, a feeble mind, or potentially none that are apparent. So you do have a chance of coming out not unscathed, but less scathed. After you've made your sacrifice and you've seen if there are going to be any other further side effects from the ritual, you are bestowed with a corrupted power. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, each more or less pertaining to a different stat. So one for melee, mind, range, resilience, body points, move. Yeah, that seems fitting. Now within the School of Corruption, we have the Keto, who are the masters of melee combat. We have the Keiru, who are dashing and dodgy. So I would assume that if you're originally School of Strength, you would probably become a Keto. If you were School of Stealth or School of Shadow, School of Stealth, you'd become a Keiru. And if you were School of Magic, you would become a Doku. Now, I don't know that that necessarily has to be the way that you do it, but that's what would make sense to me. We then come to a character sheet and a token sheet that, if this were not on the back of the index, I would probably cut out, but the index is right there. I don't want to cut the index out of the book. But if that were just a blank page on the back with all the stuff, that would be pretty dope. But I've got a chunk of the tokens because they came with the not Kickstarter, but the backroom event. But again, I do believe that Blacksite either has printable sheets and or has actual tokens that they will sell to you. And that, my friends, is the end of the book. Now, again, this game, I got this game, it fulfilled like maybe during the end of the summer or so last year, maybe a little bit later than that. But this is a whole new genre of tabletop for me, so it's taken me a little while to gather the terrain and be getting terrain built, and then scatter and the little things to try to fill up the world and make it feel right and be fun and be presentable and be a cool looking table. So if you're looking at the game there and you want to play it as is, there is, and you want to have nice stuff. Now, if you don't care about any of those things, whatever, but there is a sizable somewhat commitment to getting the and stuff that you're going to need to get that set up. Now, again, you could also go the route of reskinning and kind of do it more, play the rules more with just the models and the setting that you have available to you, and that's perfectly acceptable. If that's how you choose to enjoy the game or how you are able to enjoy the game, then go for it. Now, I do believe that if you're printer friendly, they do offer quite a few STLs for the game, as well as selling the actual models, the monsters and the schools. You can buy the whole school at the time, so you would get one of each of the school for probably $25-30, maybe not even that much. I'm not certain, because again, I haven't looked too deeply at the prices on these because I was in on the back room, so I just kind of got it all in a bundle. But I really love the art in the book. I love the simplicity of the dice system. I like the simplicity of the leveling system. I don't have to keep up with XP or anything like that. Just if I kill a boss, I get a level. I like that a lot. Downsides are definitely the amount of preparation that it has taken for me to get the game to the table. That's no one's fault but mine, but it is still a gripe on my list. Overall, I think that if you're looking for something new and you're looking to expand your collection into a new setting, or especially if you already have, or you're playing Test of Honor or Clash of Katanas or any of those games, then I think there's probably no reason that you shouldn't go grab some random monster models, unless you just are strictly a historical kind of person. And that's okay if you are too, because if that's how you enjoy the hobby, that's fine, because any way that people roll dice is usually a good way to do it, unless you're being harsh and bringing down other people's good times. But anyways, before I ramble, let me say thank you so much for stopping by, hanging out, letting me talk at you for a few minutes about Hametsu from Blacksite Studios. And I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day.